estructuras se aplican en Brasil, en Uruguay, en Bolivia. Es decir, hay una opresión a estos países que son países que les están proporcionando riqueza a todas estas grandes empresas y que los tienen sometidos, pero que están reaccionando porque cada día crece la resistencia. Y yo estoy convencida de que el momento de liberación para Latinoamérica va a llegar. Puede ser que demore un poco, pero va a llegar, porque un pueblo se agota, la paciencia tiene un límite y la miseria no puede seguir en esa forma.
This is a film about psychological warfare designed to distract, misinform,
but trust me,
and anesthetize the brain.
Like that, but I got you. Let me play this video.
What happened years ago may have a bearing on what happens tomorrow. Millions of clippings are preserved in the Times Library, all indexed for instant use, a priceless archive of events and the men who make them.
There is a saying about legislation that legislation is like making sausage, that the less you know about how it's done, the better for your appetite. The same is true of this business.
That is, history is what appears in the New York Times archives. The place where people will go to find out what happened is the New York Times. Therefore, it's extremely important, if history is going to be shaped in an appropriate way, that certain things appear, certain things not appear, certain questions be asked, other questions be ignored, and that issues be framed in a particular fashion. Now, in whose interests is the history being so shaped? Well, I think that's not very difficult to answer.
The process by which people make up their minds on this is a much more mysterious process than you would ever guess from reading Manufacturing Consent. If you're in a conference in which decisions are being made on what to put on page one or what not, you would get, I think, the impression that important decisions were being made in a flippant and frivolous way. But in fact, given the pressures of time to trying to get things out, you resort to a kind of a shorthand. And you have to fill that paper up every day.
There is no response similar to that one from United States to the Soviet Union. It stops halfway somewhere. It never reaches here. The theory of subversion goes all the way back 2,500 years ago. The first human being who formulated the tactics of subversion was a Chinese philosopher by the name of Sun Tzu. To 2,500 years BC. He was an advisor for several imperial courts in ancient China. And he said, after long meditation, that to implement state policy in a warlike manner, it's the most counterproductive, barbaric, and inefficient to fight on a battlefield. You know that war is continuation of state policy, right? So if you want successfully to implement your state policy and you start fighting, this is the most idiotic way to do it. The highest art of warfare is not to fight at all, but to subvert anything of value in the country of your enemy, until such time that the perception of reality of your enemy is screwed up to such an extent that he does not perceive you as an enemy, and that your system, your civilization, and your ambitions look to your enemy as an alternative, if not desirable, then at least feasible. Better red than dead. That's the ultimate purpose, the final stage of subversion, after which you can simply take your enemy without a single shot being fired, if the subversion is successful. This is basically what subversion is. As you see, not a single mentioning of blowing up bridges. Of course, Sun Tzu didn't know about blowing up bridges. Maybe there were not that many bridges at that time. But the basics of subversion is being taught to every student of KGB school in USSR and to officers of military academies.
Curious in a kind of a mirror image way, Professor Chomsky is in total accord with Reed Irvine, who at the right-wing end of the spectrum says exactly what Chomsky does about the insinuating influence of the press, of the big media, as, quote, agenda setters, to use one of the great buzzwords at the time. And, of course, Reed Irvine sees this as a left-wing conspiracy of foisting liberal ideas in both domestic and foreign affairs on the American people. But in both cases, I think that the premise really is an insult to the intelligence of the people who consume news.
Advertisements are nothing but bait, laid out for certain types of consumers.
For up to 14 times more volume.
These same methods are used to glorify the corporations who make these products, which includes money lending and manufacturing equipment for building missiles and other armaments. The truth is that corporations exist only to make money and are even legally compelled to prioritize making profits over competing interests, such as the well-being of consumers.
This is the time sufficient to educate one generation of students or children. One generation. One lifetime span of a person, a human being, which is dedicated to study, to shaping up the outlook, ideology, personality. No more, no less. Usually it takes from 15 to 20 years. What it includes? It includes influencing, or by various methods, infiltration, propaganda methods, direct contacts, doesn't really matter. I will describe them later. Of various areas where public opinion is formulated or shaped. Religion, educational system, social life, administration, law enforcement system, military, of course, and labor and employer relations, economy, okay? 5 areas.
To eliminate confusion, all of this has nothing to do with liberal or conservative bias. According to the propaganda model, both liberal and conservative wings of the media, whatever those terms are supposed to mean, fall within the same framework of assumptions. In fact, if the system functions well, it ought to have a liberal bias, or at least appear to, because if it appears to have a liberal bias, that will serve to bound thought even more effectively. In other words, if the press is indeed adversarial and liberal and all these bad things, then how can I go beyond it? They're already so extreme in their opposition to power that to go beyond it would be to take off from the planet. So therefore it must be that the presuppositions that are accepted in the liberal media are sacrosanct, can't go beyond them. And a well-functioning system would in fact have a bias of that kind. The media would then serve to say, in effect, thus far and no further.
You know, I mean, this is, salute to everybody that hit the paper.
But it's because we're powerful, because we are winning. Mm-hmm. It's because we are threatening the establishment, we're threatening white supremacy, and like, I feel scared saying that out loud, like, and I'm like, ooh, that means it's good. That demand, you know, the demands that scare you, and you're like,
those are the best ones,
right? Now is the political moment for it, and so I just want you to talk about, like, how did you and the team, like, where did that come from? Like, how has this moment helped shape this new kind of venture of the work?
He talks all the time about beautiful struggle, right? And so there's this struggle, but we had created this culture.
3.5 billion.
Okay.
baby.
Billions of dollars.
With a B.
Billions of dollars, right?
And so just thinking about like as Black organizers and how much we do, how much we give, and like the purpose of power.
Shopping.
I think about
Always shopping. For the latest fashions and trends.
Who owns them? Who owns them?
See, I'm telling you now, don't be crazy. I tell you about my home.
Thus far and no further.
Globalization, the new slogan for empire.